Hmm. Hello, and welcome, beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me here today on the Heart of the Soul podcast. My name is Amana, and I'm so happy that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking on this earth. Together, we connect through the ancient ritual of storytelling, often sharing about that which is unseen and unspoken. It is my hope that soaking in these stories may inspire you to uncover your own innate knowing and center you into a more embodied and alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today, where I am in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, it's Monday, November 24th, 2025, and our moon is currently waxing towards our next full moon in Gemini on December 4th. And I am super excited and honored and a little bit nervous to have Dr. Melanie Jackson, who's a midwife, a podcast host of the Great Birth Rebellion, and a mother here with me through the cosmos on Zoom from across the world. So, Melanie, thank you so much for being here. And I would love for you to, take a few minutes and introduce yourself a little more fully or whatever way feels good to you.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Yes. My name is Dr. Melanie Jackson, which is always a title that makes me a little bit squeamish. But I've been encouraged by my supporters. I have to embrace that title. So it's doctor, not by trade, but by qualification. So I have a PhD, which gives me that title. And my thesis was about birth outside the system. So I studied what inspires women to choose birth outside a system. Their choices would be considered unorthodox if you were to look at it from the outside. And so I was interested in that. So that's why I'm Dr. Melanie Jackson. But before that, I was a midwife, and I am still a midwife. I work as a home birth midwife still. And I have two children who are 8 and 12, both born at home with my dear midwifery friends. What else do I do? I live on a little hobby farm in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, Australia. And we've actually just had a whole lot of baby kids born to our goats. So every morning I've just been watching little goats run around. It's so sweet.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So what else I do? Yes, the Great Birth Rebellion podcast, which is although it doesn't sound like it, it's quite academic and evidence-based, but you've heard the podcast. It really focuses on encouraging best practice and helping inform women so that they can make their own choices rather than me suggesting what the best choice for them is. What else do I do? Oh, the Convergence of Rebellious Midwives conference runs once a year here in Australia, and I'm the hostess of that. What else do I do? Look, yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
You
Parenting.
crochet? You crocheted
Oh my gosh.
pregnancy? I love
Yes.
pregnancy.
So if you don't, for those listening, if you don't know what we're talking about, if you go onto Instagram, my handle's at Melanie the Midwife, you'll see some tiles with a character named Pregnancy. And she is me dressed in a full pregnancy suit, which I crocheted, and it has full anatomy, a full vulva, an anus, pubic hair, breasts, the whole bit. It's very in your face. In fact, every time I post pregnancy on my social media, I lose followers. It's hilarious. I know. I think it just kind of culls down the audience. You sort of go, right, you're probably not in the right place if you can't handle pregnancy. But I have some significant crochet skills, which I've been crocheting since I was a teen. And it just culminated in the creation of pregnancy. So she's definitely one of my greatest crochet creations.
Yes, truly so incredible. And I love how you wear her and show her off and just, oh my gosh, if I could have one, I would. So she's
I
amazing.
found another woman who's made a crocheted pregnancy suit. She reached out to me. She lives about 12 hours away from me. I'm going to visit her later this year, and we're going to get the two crocheted pregnancy suits together. So it should be very exciting.
Very cool. I look forward to seeing those videos.
It's a bit of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, so good. So I'm wondering if you might want to start us with your own birth story from your mom or what the stories that you
Mm.
were told of your birth from her.
Yeah, how I was born. So
Hmm.
I think this is really significant because we form our own understandings about birth mostly based on what other women have told us, because very few women in society these days will witness a birth in real life. And if they do witness a birth in real life, this day and age, it's likely to be full of intervention, not truly representative of what birth is like, and then potentially increase the amount of fear that women have around birth because they're witnessing something that really can be a traumatic experience for a third of women. So I think the stories that you're told through your life really impact upon how you'll view birth. And thankfully, and my mum would have been completely unaware of it, but when she told her birth stories to me, she was framing how I see birth because she described it as, oh yeah, I got contractions. It was kind of painful. And then we drove to the hospital. And basically, before anybody else could arrive, the babies were born. And she remembers everybody being a bit flustered because she was pushing and her doctor hadn't arrived yet. And she just sort of pushed the baby out anyway. She recalled trying to sit up and then a midwife or a nurse telling her, you've got to lie down, you've got to lie down. And she just didn't, I don't think she was particularly educated about birth. And she had hired a private obstetrician, was sort of what was done back when my mum was having babies. I was born in 1984. And particularly here in Australia, we have both a public and private maternity care system. So you can get care free through government funding, and it's quite good in a public hospital. But a lot of people will also may opt to hire a private obstetrician instead, which is what she did. But she described her births as fast, fairly easy. She recalls the feeling of what it was like to stretch and a baby to be born. And she told me, like, it just happened so fast that she had me went to sleep and apparently somebody had to wake her because I was crying for a feed. And she had kind of totally forgotten that she even had a baby because of how fast it is. Somebody woke her and said, excuse me, you've got to feed your baby. And she said, what baby? So she just sort of fell into quite a deep sleep afterwards, which I mean, I think is great. Now that I'm a mum, I'm thinking, just power up for your new life with a baby. And so I never was frightened of birth because I never had a reason to be. That was pretty much the only story I heard, other than my aunts who had very similar birth stories, where all of a sudden they were in labor, their births were fairly quick, they kind of raced to the hospital, had their babies, and that was it. Nobody had had a cesarean section in my family. The babies were born vaginally. Uh, I recall visiting my auntie in the hospital who'd just had her baby and both her boobs were out. And I remember at the time thinking, whoa, her boobs are out. But she was just not phased and she just fed her baby. So I think those little moments throughout my childhood must have solidified how I felt about birth because I don't recall ever being frightened of birth. And although I'd heard stories where births hadn't gone well or where the mum was in danger or the baby was in danger, I don't think I really believed that that was a possibility for me because of what I'd learnt about births. And it turned out that, when I was pregnant with my first baby, I was 27 and I just assumed I would have a quick, uneventful labor. So much so that I almost planned around that assumption that it's going to be quick. So we need to be prepared. My midwife needs to be close by. It did impact on some of the choices I made in the preparation that I made for the birth. So, yeah, I mean, that was a nutshell. Birth seemed
Hmm.
like a non-event. If I
Yeah,
was, yeah, so that was how I was born.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great stories to hear. Hmm.
Yeah, my mum has not embellished on the whole experience, and I just think it's not a big part of who she is
Hmm.
she's not holding on to anything, I suppose, for those births. And that
Yeah.
came else in the story is just a simple kind of, oh yeah, when it's labor, we race to the
Oh.
hospital. No one really made it. She
Uh-huh.
recalls sitting in a wheelchair at the desk at the hospital doing administration tasks, like filling a form while trying to have her baby. And, somebody saying something like, you've got to fill in the form. And she said, I'm having a contraction. There's all those little annoying bits that we know of like, oh my goodness, really? She's about to have a baby and you're making her fill in a form. And, back in those days, it's all paper.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah. So, besides that, it was fairly uneventful for me.
Yeah.
Uh,
And where are you in the birth order?
I'm firstborn.
First. Okay, wow, cool.
Yes. Firstborn, and also the difference, because I've got a sister who's 18 months younger than me. Her pregnancy and birth story is entirely different, as is she. Whether or not it's related, I don't know. But my parents used assisted reproductive technology to get pregnant with me back in the day. So they, weren't getting pregnant as fast as they'd hoped, and they had some hormonal therapy. And so her pregnancy with me was very much hard fought, and her pregnancy with my sister was a little bit of a surprise, a welcome surprise, that they
Hmm.
didn't assume that they would get pregnant without assistance, and they did.
Yeah.
And back then, the obstetricians would tell women that it was fine to smoke through their pregnancies, which she did with her second. And that it was just not really advertised that was problematic, which I think, and so my sister was born preterm. She ended up in, uh, a special care nursery
Hmm.
for a while just for being premature. And I assume having smoked through your pregnancy, you end up with some issues with the baby. We know that now, but they didn't know that then.
Hmm.
And yeah, so we have very different birth stories, and but certainly mine is that her pregnancy with me was very planned, very welcome, very intentional, and fairly uneventful in terms of the birth. And
Totally.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and were you someone like I was a woman who, from a young age, always knew I wanted to be a mom. And even though my mother had me in a hospital, I always sort of knew I wanted to birth at home. And my mom was an elementary school librarian, and she like gifted me some of the like books, the older children's books about midwifery, which were neat to look at as a child and read. And I'm curious for you, did you always know you wanted to be a mom? And you started attending births as a midwife before you gave birth yourself, right?
I
Yeah.
did. No, children, in fact, not even marriage or relationships were on my radar in any way. When I went through school, resisted the advances of my now husband for months because I thought, no, no, I am going to I'm focusing right now on, we call it the HSC here in Australia for year 11 and 12. You do your HSC, and that determines the mark that you get in order to get into university. So if you do well on your HSC, you have more options to choose from at university. So I had a very clear plan. I was going to do well in my HSC, and then I was going to go to university and study a Bachelor of Health in Natural Therapies, which I did do, but I was going to go and do it way up in Byron Bay, which is the beauty, like it was this beautiful hippie epicenter of Australia. And I thought, I'm moving to Byron Bay. I'm going to study to be a naturopath. That's my path. I have no other interests at this point in my life. So, year 11, my now husband took an interest in me and worked hard to kind of win me over. And so that was really even the first time I thought of sharing my life with anybody. Turns out we ended up getting married when we were 18 because we did just fall madly in love. And I thought, well, this seems just right. But I recall, and we both went to university and we bought a house and we did all those things. But we recall having conversations of just sort of going, like take it or leave it, we could have kids, but we're quite happy. There was no wanting for a child. I was quite ambitious, I would say, of just achieving things. I didn't really have a clear idea of what I was going to achieve, but I had a tendency towards sort of setting projects and achieving and producing things. That was just typical of me through life anyway. But I never really considered children or how old I might be when I had them. I never even considered midwifery, actually, until I was a naturopath. I did go to university. I became a naturopath and had a degree in health science. And after a few years of working as a naturopath in natural therapies, and I was doing nutrition and herbal medicine and homeopathy and iridology and aromatherapy and all the things. And I noticed that the majority of my clientele were women. They had young children. They were fairly worn down physically, and they were really just trying to recover from the symptoms of being worn down. And so often I was helping women with adrenal exhaustion, just general lethargy. And I thought, wow, how I'm missing a piece here. I can give them supplements, I can advise that they rest, I can help them if they've got inflammation in their bodies. But the core of this is I just felt like I was only offering symptomatic sort of relief, but also how could they do all the things that I was suggesting for their health in their current situation with small children, feeding them and recovering from various, surgeries in childbirth and all these things. So I thought I would be really keen to specialize in women and children's health as a naturopath. So I looked into other kind of qualifications or courses that I could do that might equip me with the information I needed to help this collection of women and people. And I stumbled across midwifery because as I sort of Googled, like, health professionals plus women plus child parenting plus childbirth, it came up, midwifery, midwives work with this category of women. And so I looked into it and it was a pretty quick decision. I thought, yep, I'll probably need to get some kind of extra qualification if I'm going to understand this in any way. And then I discovered that I could either do a 3-year midwifery bachelor degree, but I already had a bachelor degree. I thought, well, I probably don't need 2 bachelor degrees. Is there a way that I could kind of, I guess, rank up higher in the qualifications? So I discovered that I could do a 2 years Masters of Nursing and then 1 year of midwifery. And in 3 years, instead of qualifying as a midwife, I could qualify as a nurse and midwife, but also have 2 postgraduate degrees. And to me, that made a whole lot of sense. I was like, it's the same amount of time for 2 qualifications and their higher ranking degree. So I was like, right, let's do that. I don't in any way want to be a nurse because nurses and midwives are 2 completely different things. And the nursing philosophy felt more of a medical philosophy where I was already sitting in in a philosophy as a naturopath that had a deep belief in the body, in the body's ability to function, and in the body's ability to heal. And so nursing didn't make sense to me on a philosophical level. It was kind of a means to an end. So any opportunity through my nursing degree, if we got to choose an assignment or we got to choose a topic, it would always be about birth, midwifery. And I was doing all the nursing work and all of that, but I would go to the library to the midwifery section and almost weekly I was taking out new books about birth and about midwifery because I sort of saw that as an opportunity to get started on my midwifery career as much as I could academically. And so that happened. By the time I got to the end of my 2-year nursing degree, they were encouraging me to enter into research. I guess they kind of identified particular students who maybe had the skill and they said, hey, we want you to stay on here and do some postgraduate study. But I was so single-minded. I said, no, I am not interested in nursing in any way. I want to be a midwife. That's where I'm going next. I've already applied. In fact, I didn't even go to my nursing graduation. It was so irrelevant to me. I thought, no, I'm going to be a midwife. And actually, the day that the nursing graduation was on, I'd already started my midwifery degree. I couldn't have gone anyway. I wouldn't have gone anyway. I was like, no, I'm now in my midwifery degree. That whole degree is dead to me. I'm still a registered nurse, but I've never worked in nursing. So that's what I did. And through that reading that I was doing during my Masters of Nursing degree is where I felt in love with midwifery. And I actually understood fully what midwifery was. It wasn't just, what I thought it was. It was way, way more. And that's also the time that I got introduced even to the idea of home birth. And
Mm.
I didn't know that was even an option. I just thought, oh, we all go to hospital. Um, and my friend realized as well that I was getting more and more into midwifery, and she was planning a home birth, and she said, "Hey, do you want to come to my birth?" I thought, "Whoa, okay, I'm going to a home birth. I really need to get super educated because I'm very unaware. I knew I was unaware, but I also knew that I needed to be the best I could be for her, and I had no idea where to start." And I stumbled across the book Spiritual Midwifery, which I feel
Mm.
like is the gateway book for everybody who's ever fallen in love with birth. There it is in your background. Yeah. Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin. If you read it now, you don't really understand why it was so revolutionary because now we're familiar with birth stories and we've come to understand the options for birth, including home birth. But when she wrote Spiritual Midwifery, the world of birth looked very, very different. This was an extreme, extreme birth choice. And she was a real pioneer. And when I read that, I felt my like my brain change. I felt the neuroplasticity of my mind reorganizing my entire idea about birth.
Mhm.
And I was very clear as to what the purpose of a midwife was and what I wanted to do in my career as a midwife. And it all just very much aligned with what I'd already been doing as a naturopath and what I believed about the body as a naturopath. This was just applying that philosophy to the timing of pregnancy and birth and postpartum. So then when I started midwifery, the university work was very much aligned to that too, the idea of physiological birth and how if we support physiology, most of the time birth is going to be fine and uncomplicated. But then we started our university placements in the hospital, and I was so confused. I didn't understand. I thought all of these people have been through university training as I have. They've all learnt about physiological birth as I have at university. But then I arrived in the hospital and they were acting complete opposite to what I'd read in research papers, what I'd been learning at university. It didn't I didn't recognize it. It's not what I'd been reading while I was doing my nursing degree. I'd been reading all these books about continuity of care and the amazing outcomes and satisfaction that women have with continuity of midwifery care. And if you leave things alone, they usually go fine. And I thought, whoa, they're just intervening and women aren't getting what they want and the women look so distressed. And I couldn't, for about 6 months, I couldn't make sense. There was a missing piece and I thought I was crazy. I thought everybody here is so calm and they seem so aware of what's going on. And it was clear that I was the black sheep of that whole situation because I was constantly getting pulled up and getting in trouble from my superiors for saying things like, um, one time in a meeting, I said, hey, all the students, we get put in these rooms looking after women having inductions and epidurals, but why can't we watch some births in the birth center? And that's why I went to that hospital. I wanted to work in the birth center there. And they said, oh, we don't let students in there until after. And so I was surprised because I was like, but that's the easy part. That's the kind of that's the safer part of this whole operation of the births that are happening in the birth center seem like where the students should start. And then you gradually work your way up to providing more complex care, like caring for a woman who's having an induction with an epidural and continuous heart rate monitoring. That situation to me felt frightening and risky, and I should not be here on my own. Yet they would just sort of shove us into the room and go, "Here you go. That's the woman you're looking after today." Yet I couldn't get in to see a birth at the birth center. And, people were constantly, saying, you gotta, like tone it down with your attitude, basically. Um, but there was a few allies. My clinical educator who was there sort of caring for all the students, she would side eye me in a knowing way of like, you're on the right track, but she said, I don't think you should stay at this hospital when you graduate because we will destroy you. And
Mm.
she said it in the kindest possible way. And I knew that. I thought I can't stay here and work like this. This does not seem right. I
Mhm.
still feel that way. I have so much respect for midwives who can work in a hospital because I think it takes a unique amount of emotional energy
Mm.
to be able to tolerate that kind of way of working, especially when you have a really deep midwifery heart. I felt fairly physically sick for that whole year, and I'm sure it was the emotional element of witnessing the types of births that were happening.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I kind of fell into midwifery by accident, just through a pursuit of knowledge. And for a while, I was working as both a midwife and a naturopath. But very soon, I was favoring midwifery work over naturopathic work. And I loved that there was like this beginning and end to the job. A woman would get pregnant and you'd care for them through their pregnancy. They would have their baby and time would tick over and you would discharge them at 6 to 8 weeks. And I was like, oh, look at that. Whereas with naturopathy, there's just no end to how many times somebody might come and see you, whether or not they took the supplements you recommended, whether or not they made the changes you recommended. There was a lot more satisfaction in midwifery. It was quite a productive kind of work, which, I really appreciated. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So by the time I finished all that, I was 24 years old. So 3 degrees later,
Hmm.
24, and I finished midwifery. And the university approached me again, as they had when I was doing nursing, saying, "Hey, would you consider postgraduate research?" Um, and somebody said, "Hey, maybe you should do a PhD." And I said, "What is that?" "What's a PhD? I don't understand." And they explained it to me, and I said, "Oh, look, I'm pretty sure that's for smart people. I don't think that's me." And the lady who suggested it, she said, "Mel, have you seen some of the idiots in the PhD program?" And she said, "You would fit right in." Not that she was calling me an idiot, but basically you'd be fine. If it's full of idiots. Even if you were one, you would be fine. And so she said, "Look, just go and see this woman, Hannah Darlin, who's now a professor, Professor Hannah Darlin here in Australia. Just go and see her. Just have a talk to her about it." So I phoned Hannah. I said, "Look, Fiona says I should come and talk to you about a PhD." I said, "I don't know. I don't really know what she's talking about. I don't understand why I would even do this." And she said, "Okay, come and see me in my office tomorrow and bring your university transcript," which was my marks for the degree. So off I went. She took one look at it. She goes, "Yep, you should be doing a PhD." I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Go home, think of a topic that you absolutely love and you want to research, and come back to me with an idea." So I'm like, "Oh, what am I interested in?" Um, anyway, so I landed on this idea of birthing outside the system because I was also working as a private midwife at that time. So I kind of just tumbled into one thing after another, and I guess just applying myself to this information and being interested and motivated was enough to land me into the PhD program, because I did quite well at uni. I came to the top of my class in midwifery, not intentionally. I just was so interested and so excited, and I just read and I wanted to be really good at it. So I just worked really hard. Um, yeah, so that's kind of how I landed in there.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So then you get your PhD, you do the whole dissertation about birth outside the system, and you're then practicing as a midwife after that. And then
Hmm.
take me into like, then did you and your husband have a conscious conversation about, you had been kind of ambivalent about having kids, but then did you make a real decision like, actually, we do want to make a baby together?
I wouldn't call it a real decision, but we weren't using contraception and we weren't being careful in any way. And we kind of just thought when it happens, it happens. Uh, and yeah, so I started my PhD when I was 25. And I was also working as a home birth midwife at that time. So I'd opened up a private practice and simultaneously I was doing the PhD and working in private practice, which you can do when you haven't got children. I know. I look back now and I think, how the heck did I do that? But, when you're 25, I was very fit and healthy. I was a naturopath. I was eating well. I was full of energy. I was sleeping full nights. I'm like, mate, I have 16 hours a day of full energy. I can do a PhD and also see my clients. So we milked every minute of the day and we were both just passionate about the work that we were doing. And we just thought, oh, well, if we get pregnant, we get pregnant. And that's what happens. My hormonal cycle was a bit odd. So my periods were unreliable. I just thought this probably would take a while anyway, because I didn't think my fertility was exceptional. But I also didn't really care. I don't know. It was weird. I was just busy. I just thought, oh, yeah, we'll deal with that when we need to. It wasn't causing me any grief. My period always just surprised me. Like, oh, we got a period. Okay, cool. Um, so then I was nearly finished my PhD. I was 28 years old. It was our 10-year anniversary because we got married when we were 18. And because we were so busy when we were 18, even, we were both at university and we were both working to try and pay this mortgage for a house that we bought at 18. Again, wild. We never went on a honeymoon because we didn't have the money or the time. So for our 10-year anniversary, we were both working and we thought, hey, we could probably take a holiday. It was the first one we'd probably really ever taken. And so we went away for 3 weeks and we just got so relaxed. So relaxed. I don't think in my whole life I ever have felt that level of relaxation. It was kind of finally a pause of the incredible pace that I just always taken life at. And so we just chilled out. We had holiday, we ate food, we had lots of sex, uh, and came back a week later. I discovered I was pregnant. I was like, that's what we needed. A nice, relaxing holiday. Time to actually, have some fun. And we got pregnant at our 10-year anniversary holiday. So I was 28. And I might have been 27 actually, because he was born when I was 28. And still I was kind of working at the same pace, but then also pregnant. And at that time we were building a house. So I was actually living with my parents for about 6 months while we built the house and worked and PhD'd and oh my gosh. Um, that pregnancy, whoa, did I learn some things because I'd already been a midwife for 4 years and was attending births, had not yet been pregnant myself, and got pregnant with my son and just got educated by pregnancy. I kept saying to my clients, why don't you all complain more? This is really hard. I'm so tired. My boobs hurt. Like I can't keep my eyes open. I just am ready to give up on life. I just want to crochet and watch cartoons. That's what, if I thought of my most favorite day, it would be not getting out of bed, having food brought to me, just crocheting all day and watching cartoons. That's what I wanted to do. In fact, I rang the university and I said, I'm pregnant and I want to take maternity leave. And they said, well, how many weeks pregnant are you? And I said, I'm 9 weeks. And they said, you can't have maternity leave at the beginning of your pregnancy. And I said, but it's really hard. But I'm having a really hard time. I can't work full time and do my PhD full time and grow a baby full time. That's crazy. They said, no, that's not what we do. So I was like, oh, okay. So I kind of had to push on. But I did take, once my baby was born, I took 6 months off my PhD. I was nearly finished. But then the university approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to teach some midwifery classes?" And I said, I've just had a baby. He's like 3 weeks old. And they said, "That's okay. We just assumed that you would bring him with you." I thought, well, I'm not doing my PhD. Maybe I'll just toddle off to the university with my baby and teach some university courses. So 2 days a week, get up, pack the baby in the car. I would drive past my mum's house and she would jump in and we would go off to the university and I would teach a few classes. And my mum would sit in with me and hold my baby, or if the baby needed a feed, I would just feed the baby and pop him in the sling and just teach the class. Um, so, again, didn't really take a break, just carried on. But through his pregnancy, I just realized what a full-time job being pregnant was. And it's not something I considered because I'd just seen all of my clients kind of get on with life very sort of stoically. And I thought, this is crazy. Why did not more people complain to me? Um, yeah. So that's kind of how I landed in pregnancy.
Yeah, so interesting. And yes, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, really.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then you prepared to birth your son at home?
Right.
Yeah.
So I was pregnant with him, and the early pregnancy was a little bit fraught. I'd had a few bleeds through the pregnancy, which
Hmm.
ended up being nothing, but they were quite stressful. There was 3 in the first 15 weeks. So I was always wondering, gosh, am I going to have a miscarriage? I don't know what's going to happen. And initially, the first 2 bleeds, I thought, look, I'm not even going to check what's happening because actually nothing can be done. It doesn't matter. There's no medicine for this. There's no anything for this. If I'm going to have a miscarriage, that's what's going to happen, regardless of what the cause is. So I
Hmm.
kind of was just resolved to sit in that uncertainty. But then I had another quite big bleed at 15 weeks, and I thought, right, I would probably like to know what's going on because this was a significant bleed. I had full pads on, and there was blood dripping into the toilet, and I thought, that's a lot. That's a lot. This is not just a little bit, and there was no real explanation for it. So had an ultrasound at that point, and they said, look, we can't see any reason why you would be bleeding. We can't see where the blood is coming from. And I thought, well, good. If it's not the placenta and the baby's fine, and like my uterus is not bleeding, I'm comfortable to just not be sure where that ever came from. And I still don't know. Um, I declined a check on my cervix just because I thought my main interest is finding out if this is a placental issue, and if it's not, then I'm cool with not knowing. And I never did bleed again, but I did have a very strong feeling that that baby was going to be born early. I was born early, my sister was born early, and I had a strong feeling that he was also going to be born early. I don't know why I had that feeling, but it was a very strong sense. And I kept saying to him, make sure you just get close enough to the end because you're going to be born at home. So, don't break your waters too early and, not too early, please. There was a lot of talking to him, like, you're going to be born at home. Let's just remember you can't come too soon. But I did express to my midwife that I thought he was going to be born early, and how did she feel about that? Because I wanted her to feel professionally comfortable with coming to a home
Hmm.
birth for a baby who wasn't full term. And she said, "Oh, Mel, first time mothers never have their babies early." Like, kind of brushed it off a little bit. And I said to her, "I think I do really want you to be ready for an early birth." And at that time, we used to bring a birth kit to the woman's home when she sort of became close to being, to her due date. There was a little bit of early preparation that we do to take a few things to the woman's house beforehand. And I said to her, I want you to bring the birth kit sooner than you normally would. She did reluctantly, kind of, she didn't really believe that was going to happen. But at 36 weeks and 2 days, I started to get contractions. And I thought, oh, okay, I think, well, this is
Hmm.
happening. And it was interesting because a friend of mine was also pregnant, but she lived in India. And she rang me and she said, Mel, my waters have broken, but I haven't started labor. and I'm a little bit concerned because I'm here in India. She was planning a birth center birth with some midwives in India. She did not want to go to a hospital in India. She knew what happened there for women who were giving birth. And she said, look, if I don't go into labor soon, there could be a problem. I might need to go to the hospital. And she said, can you pray for me? And I thought, right, absolutely. So I went to bed that night praying for my friend that she would go into labor. And I woke in the middle of the night with contractions for myself. And I thought, I better remember to pray for Nay. This is why I've been woken, is to remember to pray for her because I don't know what's happening for her in India. So I prayed for her, and then my contractions continued. And I messaged her and I said, how are you going? And she said, oh, I'm getting contractions. I said, hey, so am I. And her baby ended up being born the day after, perfectly fine. And then I continued to labor. So I labored through that night and the next day and the next night. And we got to sort of the, 2.5 days into this labor, and my midwife was like, hey, you're 36 weeks. Um, your baby's there's gonna be a limit to this. Like, we really need to get this labor going. And I said, well, I'm not going to hospital. I'm not, I don't want to do that. There's a lot that I didn't do in my pregnancy, no gestational diabetes testing, no GBS testing. I'd had the 1 or 2 ultrasounds, maybe that, the sort of the bare bones of what would be expected. I was a very small, like I'm a small person. Um, and possibly at that time would have been classed as underweight, not intentionally, that was just how my body was. So there was a few elements where if I'd walked into hospital and said, oh, by the way, my baby's 36 weeks, I've been laboring for over 30 hours, I have not had any of the testing that you're expecting me to have, and don't touch me unless it's absolutely necessary. It was I knew it wasn't going to be received very well, and I didn't want to be augmented with oxytocin or anything like that. So I said to her, I need to stay home and get this baby out. So
Sorry, something's wrong. Please try again.
Sorry, my phone is listening to me. That's very mm. um and I so we were laboring, and the day I gave birth, my contractions stopped.
Hmm.
And we sort of all sat around going, well, what do we do? It was me. I was a home birth midwife. I had 2 other home birth midwives there, and we're kind of going, what's happening? Um, for some reason, my body stopped contracting. But we did do a check on my cervix, and I was 10 centimeters dilated. So I was fully dilated. Once the baby moved down, I could have given birth, but there was no contractions. So we were kind of like, oh, what do we do about this? So I had a big long sleep. I had a big meal. We went for a walk after I had a sleep, and then still not really anything was happening. Um, and one of the midwives said, well, maybe we can call an acupuncturist to come to the house. And I thought, mate, if you can find someone, I'm open. I'm happy to do anything at this point. It's been 2.5 days, fully dilated with a preterm baby. We're here at home. Like, something's got to happen next. So she called the acupuncturist, who arrived at the birth around 2:30 in the afternoon. And we gave her a very quick rundown of what was happening. Mostly there was just no urge to push. There was no contractions. So she knew she needs to get the baby lower in my pelvis and start contractions again. And so the first needles she put in, I was lying down on my side, and she put them almost over my tailbone, and she tracked them down. And as she was doing that, I felt my baby sort of land in my pelvis quite aggressively, and I went, "Whoa!" Like, I let out this really big sort of like as if someone had punched me in the guts almost. And I just felt him move down, and I said to her, "Oh, I think that worked." She went, "Great, good." So then she moved the needles into some points. There was some in my hands, some in my ankles, some in my belly. And then she would tweak them every few minutes, and I started getting contractions almost immediately. And I didn't realize at the time, but every time I got a contraction, she had been tweaking the needles to bring it on. So I don't know if my body had taken over at that point or if that was still under the influence of the acupuncture needles. Nor did I really care. I was just like, we kind of need to get this going. We can't go into day 3 or 4, or day 4 really, of a labor like this. There's a human limit to what we can do. And so 2:30, she started the acupuncture, and yep, baby felt lower down. Contractions had started again, and I was sitting on the toilet. She must have had some conversations with my midwife outside the room, and then she came into me almost like very clear that she needed to tell me something. She knelt down next to the toilet. She said, Mel, I want to put a needle in your perineum. And I sort of looked at her blankly, trying to make sense of this, like, needle in my perineum. And mid thought, I heard my midwife yell out from the doorway, just do it, Mel. And I thought, I mean, I do just have to do it because what choice do I have? I don't have another option here. I'm not going to hospital, so I need to take advantage of whatever option I've got. So I was like, rightio, let's put a needle in the perineum, which she did. And I later learnt from another client who is an acupuncturist that there's a acupuncture point sort of at the top pole in your head, on the top of your head, and there's a corresponding point to your perineum. And they're considered some of the more powerful acupuncture points. You don't use them very often. It's kind of the Mr. Miyagi of acupuncture needle points, and you just sort of, whoa, I'm pulling out all the stops. So she did that. And whether or not it was the effective one or not, I don't know. But I still didn't have an urge to push, but I was getting contractions. And my midwife said, I said to her, what are we going to do? I mean, what now? She said, well, I guess, she said, we could break your waters. And I said, I don't want that. I don't want to do that. And she said, okay, well, maybe just start pushing. Maybe just see what happens if you start pushing. And I thought, can't hurt. Give it a go. So we got the birth stool and I started pushing and we could see some bulging down below. And I thought, great, there's some change. I could see in the mirror that there was some change. I could see something coming out. I was like, great, that's my baby. This might just be how I have to do it. I don't have an urge to push, but clearly he has the ability to come down. And I wanted to have him by then. The sun was starting to go down again. And this was night, 3. Yeah. So I was like, I do want to have my baby. And thankfully, bless his little heart, he had not skip a beat. The midwives are always checking with the Doppler for his heartbeat. There was no reason to be concerned. Everyone was healthy and well. And I was pushing and pushing and pushing, and I could see something coming. And then my waters broke very dramatically, very Hollywood style. The style that I tell people now, oh, that's not how it happens. That's how it happened. It soaked the floor. We had to mop it up with towels. There was just so much fluid. And then the next time I pushed, I saw nothing. I thought, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been pushing out the membranes. That was okay. And I pushed for 2.5 hours, and around 6:30 p.m. he was born. And he was so well. He was pink and he cried. He was tiny, tiny little guy. He weighed 2.3 kilos. And I knew he was going to be early. I'd made plans for this. I actually made plans to do kangaroo care, which is where you basically you keep the baby skin to skin 24 hours a day. And the research on that in less developed countries is that for babies who are born preterm, where there's not a lot of technology and medical care, they actually found that the babies who were kept skin to skin did much better than the babies who were isolated in humidity cribs and who weren't close to their mothers. So I was like, right, well, that's what I'm going to do. And we kept him skin to skin in this wrap for about 4 weeks. He virtually never left me. And from the minute he was born, he could suckle. He was beautiful and pink. He maintained his temperature. That's what we worry about with little babies, is warm, pink, and sweet. And I knew that as a midwife that he would need some extra special care, that he didn't have any reserves. he didn't really have that fat layer that babies develop in those final weeks of pregnancy that tied them over while your milk comes in. And so I thought, right, he has no energy to spare. He's got to stay warm. He's got to sleep as much as he possibly can. And I need to get milk into him. But from the minute he was born, he could suckle and feeding went well. And by 2 weeks, he'd already gained half a kilo. So I was
Amazing.
like, right, he's doing fine. Um, yeah, that was my birth with Charlie 12 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, so then yeah, he's born and now you have transitioned from this like maiden into motherhood. Is there anything about that matrescence journey that you want to share before we move to your next birth?
Mm. Um, I feel like I transitioned into motherhood fairly well. I kind of, like everything in life, kind of took this on as my next project. And I probably, if I look back on it, you would imagine like it appeared that though I thrived through motherhood. But I've always had beautiful support around me. My mum is
Mm,
very nurturing, my family's very nurturing. I I was very actively involved in a lot of communities. We had a church community. I had very good friends, relationship with friends. Obviously, the midwifery community, and I was in the birthing community because I was a midwife in my local area. And my husband's very nurturing and caring. And so I think that I unintentionally have maintained relationships that are nurturing. Obviously people at some point feel nurtured by me and reciprocate and, had this very big village, which was part of my life, but probably was the key to just transitioning fairly well through into motherhood. And I think that's what's missing these days is women are like, oh my gosh, I need all this help but haven't been able to curate a community around them or realize that that was even needed.
yeah, I think most women don't really realize they need it until they're in it. And when you're in that postpartum time, I feel like for myself, it was a hard time to then like reach out to people. It didn't feel
It's almost too
always.
late.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's that I think curating a community is this long-term investment,
Hmm.
which I'd accidentally done, which I did do and didn't realize how instrumental it would be as I
Yeah.
transitioned. So, meals were brought to us. My mum would come and clean the house. My husband was
Hmm.
around attending to things. That we were cared for.
Hmm.
And that's what women need. We can parent, we can be sleepless, we can deal with nutrient deficiencies and sore nipples and all these things, but only if the rest of the things that are going around us are taken care of. And that's
Hmm.
what happened. I was allowed to rest.
Yeah. And you were as a new mother also mothered, it sounds like, by the community
Oh
and
yeah.
people around you, which is what all new mamas really need.
Absolutely. And I think that's, even having taken that job at the university at that time, when they said, oh, we just assumed you would bring your baby. I mean,
Hmm.
even that meant, oh, well, this is just a day out, really. I will lecture for 2 hours. My baby's still there. Everyone is expecting that the baby's going to be there. So I never felt like he was an imposition or, everyone just rallied. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't remember it being a hard time. I'm sure it was. I'm sure there were hard parts at where I
Sure.
was tired and yeah, but I definitely wasn't depleted by it. Like
Mm.
some women are absolutely crushed by motherhood,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
that's not what happened to me. I kind of kept going, and
Hmm.
he would come with me to appointments and all kinds of things. And I just made all of my clients aware, like, hey, I'm a mum now and my baby will be with me. And so if you don't like that,
Hmm.
don't hire me. I'm not your
Yeah.
midwife this time. Yeah. So
Yeah.
hence, yeah, which was I was just
Amazing. Good.
yeah, I was just really clear. I can be a
Uh-huh.
midwife, but my child will be with me. He'll be coming to the birth.
Hmm.
Um, you know, so there were less women who chose me as their midwife, but that's what
But
I
the
needed
right
to do.
women did. Yeah.
Yes. And the expectation was set that I was going
Cool.
to prioritize mothering, and if I could do all the rest, I would. If
Mhm.
everybody was accepting of the fact that I was going to mother all the way through that. So I also finished writing my PhD uh, while I had Charlie, and I just remember he was just strapped on and feeding all the time, and I'd go to meetings and type my thesis in moments that I had, and yeah. So then I got. I didn't feel like I wanted to have another baby just yet. I was quite intensely parenting, very consciously. We were, if I had to call it something, we were attachment parenting, which meant that we were co-sleeping and breastfeeding on demand. And, we was a kind of really nurturing way of parenting. We were very dialed in, both of us, my husband and I.
Mhm.
And so I think that left less room for another baby soon because we were kind of really in it, and we had our own projects and
You were finishing a
activities.
house or something too, right? You would like,
Yeah,
yeah.
we just moved into
Uh-huh.
our new house, which wasn't really finished yet. We
Uh-huh.
kind of moved in a hurry. The PhD was happening. My husband was working full time. I
Mhm.
was, working a few days at the university, and we had this new baby. So it was wild.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
then
then when
you heard a little call from another soul or a desire from within to
well, it wasn't until 2.5 years later, I remember thinking, I feel like I'm ready for another baby now. I feel like
Mhm.
I'm ready. But at that time, I'd been offered a job with the Australian College of Midwives. It was a 1 year contract to try and get an insurance product for private midwives. And so in Australia at that time, private midwives didn't have any professional indemnity insurance. It was a real issue, and everyone was trying to find a solution to this. So the Australian College of Midwives was like, "Hey, we've got this funding from the government to come up with a product." Um, the ad that was advertised, I think about 10 people sent it to me, like, "Hey, you need to do this thing." And as it was written, it looked like somebody had written it for me. And I thought, oh, I've got every single one of these criteria. I don't know who else would. Maybe I'll give it a go. Maybe I'll try and apply. It was quite a big deal, I thought at the time. And I was, yeah, 29. No, wait, I was older than that. Anyway, 30 maybe. I was 30. Um, and I applied and I got it. But it was full time. But I said to them, if I take this job, I still have clients. I will still need to go off to births. And I dedicated like a half day Saturday to appointments to see my clients on the weekend. And I would work full time doing this job, with this insurance product for midwives. And my husband quit his job in order for me to do that. So he became kind of the full time carer for our son, who was at that time just over 2 years old. And so it wasn't until he was about 2.5 where I thought, okay, I think I'm ready for another baby, but I'm in this contract now. So the minute the contract finishes, we'll try for another baby. And when that contract finished, we started trying for a baby. And again, my cycle wasn't quite as good as I would hope. I didn't feel like it was a very fertile kind of situation. So I went to the acupuncturist who was with me for the birth, and I said, right, we want to have a baby, but my cycle's a bit all over the place and I actually don't want to wait as long as I did last time. So she made a plan. She goes, right, after your next bleed, come on over. We'll do acupuncture this day, and this day. We'll elicit an ovulation and then da da da. So we did that, and that cycle I got pregnant with Frida, who is now 8. I was like, oh, it worked. I'm pregnant. Great. So it only took kind of, 1 month of a very, solid plan with the acupuncturist. She was obviously highly skilled, very, very skilled acupuncturist. Um, Frida's pregnancy was completely different to Charlie's. I kind of felt that she was the strong and silent type, whereas Charlie was very kind of blissful and sort of a bit of a party animal. Frida was dark, strong, independent. Like I felt very clear personalities from both of them through the pregnancy. I did think that maybe I would have another early baby, but I didn't feel it strongly with her. But I was kind of expecting not to go all the way past 40 weeks. But at 40 weeks and 2 days, finally went into labor with Frida, which I thought was the longest pregnancy ever because it was 4 weeks longer than the last pregnancy. And I thought, oh my gosh, this kid's never coming out. My midwife just had to constantly remind me, even at 38 weeks, I'm like, where's the baby? She goes, you're only just term, chill out. So I was like, oh, all right, fine. So finally with her, when I went into labor, I just thought I'm never going to go into labor. So that weekend I went on this big long bushwalk. We live in a beautiful national park, so there's lots of bushwalks to go to. I had the biggest, most obnoxious meal at a cafe. Like the waiter even said to me, there's no way you're going to be able to finish all this food. I was like, watch me. I just did not care at that point. I was like, I'm just going to stay pregnant forever and eat all the food and go and have fun out in the bush. And that night, my mum rang me and she's, oh, Mel, our car's broken down. Can we come up and get your second car? Because she was supposed to be my support person for the birth. And she said, if you go into labor, we don't have a second car for me to come up to you. She's like, you're not going anywhere for the next few weeks. Why don't I take your second car? I was like, that's a great idea. Come on up. We'll order some food and have dinner together. You can take the car home. And she came up and we were all eating takeaway food. I don't know, it was Chinese or something, Chinese food. And I started feeling contractions and I didn't really say anything. I just thought, oh, we're getting some tightenings. Okay, we'll finish our meal. There's still a whole house of people here. And as dinner was wrapping up and everyone was kind of getting ready to go and take the car, I said to my mum, do you mind staying a bit longer and maybe just putting Charlie to sleep, our first baby, our first child? I said, I'm starting to get some contractions and I don't know where this is going to go. And you're already here, you might as well just hang out. So my dad and my sister went home in his car, and my mum thought, well, if I need to go home later, I'll just drive Mel's second car home. So about 6:30 p.m., I started getting contractions when we were eating. And then by 7:30, we were getting our son ready for bed. And I was trying to explain to my mum where all his pajamas were and his kind of nighttime rhythm. Like, oh, the pajamas are in there and his toothbrush is there. We're just there's a book there. And I remember having to take a break from the explanation to hold on to the door frame for a few contractions. And then halfway through the conversation, I went, I'll forget it. You'll work it out. I'm just going to go in here and have some contractions because this thing's kicking off. And I texted my sister at about 8 p.m. to say, hey, I'm pretty sure I might be in labor. Just so you know, because she was tasked with bringing me a plate of oysters afterwards because I was craving oysters and I desperately wanted oysters. So I was like, get ready with the oysters. Don't show up without them. I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. Make it your plan in the morning to pick up oysters and bring them to me in my postnatal bed because that's what I want. I was very clear. And so she's like, rightio. So that was 8 p.m. and labor just progressed. My husband set up the pool. He was setting up mats. I just remember him frantically running from room to room, gathering things because it just kicked off. Soon enough, I was leaning, over my bedside table, bashing on the table through contractions, just oh my gosh. And at one point, he said, do you think I should ring the midwives? And I said, oh, don't ring them yet. We called them. I felt like I'd called them too soon the first time because the labor was so long. I said, don't call them yet. This could go on forever. And I don't want to bother them at this point. Unbeknownst to me, he was aware of what was happening and he did call the midwives, thankfully, because I would have waited too long. And I didn't feel like I needed them, but he was like, this, I think the baby's going to come soon. So that kicked off. And at one point, I was kneeling on the floor, hands and knees, and it was on the wood floor. So there was no furnishings, nothing down there because it was just going so fast. And my son walked in his little jammies and he sat there on the chair in the bedroom and he watched a few contractions. And he said, Mum, I think your knees are going to get sore if you stay there like that. And he went off and grabbed some towels. And I remember him trying to stuff them under my knees during a contraction. And my husband said, oh, come away a little bit. She's a bit busy. And I remember thinking, no, he knows what needs to happen here. And mid-contraction, I said, no, he can stay. He's fine. Um, and the contraction finished and I was able to lift my knees up and he put the towels under there and sat back on his little chair, which is so classic of how he was as a toddler. He was very in tune and tapped in, very clever, and he still is very intuitive and intelligent. And he kind of watched for a bit and he said, oh, I think I'm going to go to bed now. And he just toddled off to bed with my mum and they slept together in his bed while I laboured. And my husband was trying to fill up the birth pool because I didn't have my first baby. I didn't have my son in the pool because just of how kind of complex everything had gotten by the end. And we all thought, probably best not to have him in the water. But I thought I want to get in for this one, for this birth. But the pool could not be filled fast enough because it was really progressing very fast. It was very strong. My first labor was not so strong. It was just really drawn out. The contractions were very manageable. And I remember just feeling bored through my first labor. I was like, oh, here's another one. Here we go. It was just kind of like, oh, let's do another one. With my next contraction, with my next birth, this one that was going so much faster, I remembered the difference between the strength of the contractions, and they were much, much stronger and much closer together. And that struck me. I was like, "Whoa, that's huge! What the heck?" And so there wasn't very much gap. And my husband managed to fill the pool. I got in. The midwives turned up at some point. I'm pretty sure if I looked at the notes, they maybe arrived around 9:30 p.m. Remembering at 8 o'clock, I'd said to my sister, I think I might be in labor. And 7:30, I kind of abandoned nighttime plans. And they arrived at 9:30. I got in the pool and I remember looking at the clock and it said 10 p.m. And I said to everyone in the room, I am going to be in my bed by 11 o'clock. There is no way I could do this type of labor for any longer than an hour. Like, that's crazy. It felt like it felt 100%. And I thought, surely it can't get any stronger. And I just declared by 11 p.m., I'm going to be sitting in that bed with my baby. It turned out that, yes, soon after that, I started to feel an urge to bear down. And it just felt glorious. I can't describe the difference with my first birth, pushing without an urge and not really feeling like I felt like I really had to force him out. Whereas this one, my body was doing all the work and I was just along for the ride. And I felt my body start to bear down and I thought, oh, here we go. I know what this means. And I, at that point, decided, midwife brain, I put my finger in my vagina to sort of go, ooh, how close is this baby? This is kind of cool. And I felt her at the top of my finger and then, kind of waved my finger at my midwife and sort of showed her up to which point I could feel the baby. She's like, great job, Elle, it's good. And then I did another push and I thought, oh, I wonder if that did anything because I really felt the baby moving really like really deep and low. And I thought, gosh, I really felt that. I felt the movement down into my pelvis and I was curious more. I was like, oh, what happened? And I put my finger in and she was just nearly, I get, 1/3 of my finger went into my vagina before I felt her head. And I said to my midwife, oh, like I again showed her and she goes, oh my gosh, Mel, that's amazing, And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is the best feeling ever. I don't think I've ever felt something so physically satisfying, so incredible. And I had this uninhibitable, if that's a word, could not inhibit a laugh, like a hysterical laugh. And I started laughing like a maniac, like a hysterical maniac. It was, I couldn't understand the sound that was coming out of me. And in my brain, I thought, gosh, put a lid on it, Mel. That's epic. But then I thought, actually, no, I don't want to put a lid on it. This is so nice. It felt so nice. And so she's almost emerging. I'm laughing hysterically, and the contractions are coming, and I could feel her stretching my vulva. I could feel that I was full stretch, and I remember in my head thinking, yeah, I think my vagina's at full stretch now. But how blissful it felt. I was absolutely relishing in it. I did not pay any attention to who was around me. I just was like, this is the most insane feeling ever. And the bliss of her head emerging, I was like, oh, that was so satisfying. And then, so her head was out, and the next contraction, I felt no urge, like the urge completely changed. And the contraction came and went, and I thought, oh my gosh, I did not feel like pushing my baby out. That felt weird to me. And I said to my midwife, and I don't think I was scared, but I did feel like that wasn't right. I was like, that didn't feel right. I think I want you to do something. And I just said to her, get her out. And she's like, what? I said, get her out. So she just reached up. I think I must have had another contraction and still no movement of the baby. She reached up, found my baby's shoulder, and just kind of gave her a little bit of a. I mean, I didn't feel any of that. I don't recall feeling her hand in there, which later she said, oh, I had to put my hand into to swish the shoulder around to get her out. But she came out with that pretty quick motion. I didn't have to get out of the pool. I didn't need to change positions. And then out my baby came to me on my chest, and I just went into this blissful land. And the only thing that dragged me out of it was the midwife going, hey, Mel, you might just want to like bring your baby in. And I looked down and she was all floppy and a bit kind of not there yet. And I went, oh gosh. So, I gave her a bit of a rub and spoke to her a little bit and breathed on her face. And she came in quite quickly. She wasn't compromised. I wouldn't say she was compromised. I just didn't notice that she hadn't had this big hearty cry yet. um, and pretty quickly, once she came to and went, oh, holy moly, I'm born, she latched to the breast. And my husband came around behind me and he went, oh, hello, Frida. And she detached from my breast and was so wide-eyed and looked directly in his eyes. I thought, oh my gosh, this kid is here. She is ready. She's full term, which was bizarre to me. I was like, I'm used to these kind of weakling little babies that needed, that needed help surviving. And I just remember thinking, gosh, she is ready. She's so ready for the world. And she was, and she is. And I used to joke as a child, like, has anybody seen Frida? And they said, oh, and one of my friends said, oh, is she a runner? I said, no, I'm more concerned she's gone off and gotten a job and a mortgage. She was just capable. And I planned on taking 18 months off like I hadn't with Charlie. And I thought, this time I'm just going to enjoy motherhood. I'm going to do nothing else. I'm just going to completely bask in the work of caring for my children. And I thought I was going to do that. But 9 months in, I was like, she doesn't even need me. She breastfed, but it was very sort of only for business. For Charlie, he had lots of feeds for everything. I'm upset, I want to feed. I need a cuddle, I'm having a feed. I'm hungry, I'll have a feed. She was like 15 minutes only and every 4 hours. And if you try to feed me any more than that, she got really cranky, like very upset at me. Sometimes she would pound at my chest to almost like, stop it. Stop trying to feed me all the time. And so I was like, what do you even want? She just wanted to live her life fairly independently of me, which I was fine with. I didn't take it personally. I was like, that's just how you are. But I thought, well, maybe at least I can do something with my day then. So I decided to start taking clients on again when she was about 9 months because I was like, gosh, this kid, she doesn't even need me.
Wow.
Yeah, so there were two totally different babies, two totally different births.
Yes.
Um,
And your placentas, did they come easily for both
Oh,
or
of
yeah?
course, placentas. Placentas, my least favorite part because I just feel like they get in the way sometimes. I'm like, oh, can this woman just enjoy her baby? But anyway, we have to have our placentas. The first placenta with Charlie was such a long birth that when I started to get contractions again after he was born, I remember being really annoyed. I was like, oh, no, I just did it. And I went, oh, that's right. I've got to actually give birth to this placenta because if you give birth to your placenta without medicine, it's maternal effort. It's your effort that gets it out. I said to my midwife, gosh, I really don't want to. I'm so tired. I don't want to. And she looked at the acupuncturist who was still there. She's like, have you got a needle for that? And the acupuncturist was like, yeah, I do. I was like, look, can we do that? Like, can we put an acupuncture needle in to get this placenta out? Because I really don't want to have to work for it. So she did. She put a needle in and out blobbed this my placenta onto the bed. I was like, oh, fantastic. Good. That's done. With Frida's, I had so much energy that I had gotten out of the pool. I was in bed before 11 p.m., by the way, with her. She was born at
You
10:30.
knew
I know.
no, yeah, you knew your son was
Yeah.
going to be early. You knew you were going to be in bed by
I was
11.
getting in bed. So she was born at 10:36. And I remember sitting in the bed and looking at the clock and it said 11 p.m. I was like, I knew it. I was going to be in here. The placenta wasn't out at that point, but there was just it was kind of a bit of an afterthought actually. I sat down, I was feeding her. My husband was there and the midwife said, hey, do you want to try and get the placenta out? And I remember just kind of stepping off the bed and squatting over this bowl that the midwife was holding. And I went, oh, here we go. And I just sort of pushed it out and there, had my placenta. And I remember the midwife going, easy. It's like a non-event. So I didn't bleed afterwards. My postnatal recovery was fine. I had no tears for both the babies, so I didn't
Mhm.
need any stitches. And yeah, I mean, fairly blessed journey, but I was and still am hyper vigilant with self-care. Um, like great nutrition. I exercised through both the pregnancies. um, I rested. Like I took very seriously that I was pregnant and
Mhm.
looked after myself because I do believe, and I did believe that the more you can care for your bodies, the better they'll function. And so if you want to have, a less complicated birth, the least we can do is contribute what we can, and then after that we have no control. But I
Mhm.
thought, well, I want to make sure that I've done everything I can to make sure that this all goes smoothly. So yeah, I don't think it was an accident that I was able to do that level of activity and that I didn't tear and that I didn't bleed and that I was, healthy to put in that amount of physical effort.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, but I do also think that I have a strong mental game just generally in life, and that got me through labor as well.
Yeah.
I don't think I built a strong mental game in order to labor, but I think just through my life, I developed a way of doing hard things, and this was just the hard thing for the day. It was having a baby. Um, yeah, those were
Yeah,
my
that's a very
births.
important part of labor for
Yeah.
sure, the mental game. And having people around you that also know birth and how to support you through it. I was listening to one of your episodes where you were um talking to birth support people and just saying how important it is that you're like encouraging the mom being on her team, not like the opposite. So I think it's so
Yeah,
important.
I see the support people as so I encourage people to see yourself as the marathon runner. So, marathon runners, I've got a friend who runs marathons. You can physically prepare, but if you get halfway through that race and your mind fails you and starts telling you that you can't finish, your body, regardless of how far it can run, will not finish that race. And I see birth as the same, is that
Hmm.
your mind is the thing that will drive how much you can do, how long you can last, how you manage contractions. And if you've got a support team, imagine taking a marathon support team with you who's standing on the sidelines yelling things like, "You're never going to finish. Like, you can't do this. How are you going to make it? You're only halfway. You're already tired." Imagine having a marathon crew like that. You would immediately send them away. You would never invite them back. But if they're on the sideline going, you got the energy to get to the end, like you start to believe what people tell you, you start to believe what you tell yourself, and that dictates how far you can physically go in labor and how much you're willing to tolerate in order to get there. So I think mental game, like I believe that most women's bodies are physically capable of providing them with whatever they need to get to the end of their labor and birth. But a lot of women don't have the mental stamina. And I think that's a learned skill that you can't just kind of pick up by accident. I think you've got to, through your pregnancy and hopefully through your life, develop a way of persevering through hard things by talking yourself through it, like up talking yourself, almost irrationally telling yourself you can do things that seem impossible. And that develops a capacity to do hard things, which is exactly what labor is. It's something really hard that you have to work through, that you're capable of doing. But if your mental game fails you, it doesn't matter what your body can do, you won't continue.
So true.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have
I think
two lingering questions about
yes.
this birth.
Yeah.
Did you get your oysters the next morning?
I
And was your
did.
son present? Yeah.
I got my oysters. They were amazing. Everything I would have hoped for. Um, with my son, we had been asking him through the pregnancy, do you want to be there for the birth? And he was very clear. He was nearly 4 by that time. In fact, they're 4 days apart, 4 years and 4 days apart. So um, he, I said to him, do you want to see the birth? And he was really clear, I'm happy to see the birth if I'm awake, but do not wake me up for the birth. And I said, that's fine. I don't need you to see the birth. I wanted it to just be a regular day for him. You go to bed, mum's having a baby. But he was 4, and we'd gotten into the habit of around sort of 3 in the morning, we could hear him fussing around the bed. And we thought, well, I think he probably needs to go to the toilet around that time. So my husband had kind of gotten into this little habit of if he heard him fussing in the bed a little bit and flipping and flopping, he'd sort of sleepily put him on the toilet for a, mid-morning wee and then tuck him back into bed. And Frida was born 10:30ish, and Charlie did his little fussing in the night, and Dan got up to go and pop him on the toilet for a wee. And on the way back to his bedroom, I said, "Hey, Charlie, look, she's born." And he kind of sleepily went, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah," and then tucked back into bed, fairly uninterested. And then in the morning, he woke up and he walked past our room to go to the toilet himself. And I said, "Hey, Charlie," I said, "Look." And he goes, "I know, Mum. I saw last night. I saw it." And then he just kind of went about his day. He went downstairs and had breakfast with Dan, and I thought, he'll. And then he came up almost like ready to meet her. He's like, Mum, I'd like to meet Frida. And I've got this photo. He crawled up on the bed, like in his own time. He kind of inspected her a little bit, and then I said, "Do you want to hold her?" And he said, "Yeah, I want to hold her." And I've got this photo of him just looking down at her, like he just had this moment. He's like this, just divine. And then he was finished. He goes, "I'm finished now," and he handed her back to me and went about his day, which is exactly what I wanted. I just wanted it to be an event in the day that that happened, and we could all kind of carry on with life. And that's what it felt like. I didn't force him to stay. I didn't instruct anything. I just kind of wanted him to be involved as he needed to be. And I feel like, it didn't create any tension in the relationship that I had with him. Um, you know, it was a regular day in the life of
Yeah.
child. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, Melanie, thank you so much for sharing these incredible and like distinctly their own birth stories. I love how birth is so, everyone is unique, but also like these same things unfold. And I would love to ask you one more little question, and that is, what does soul mean to you, or do you have a relationship to the concept of soul or a definition that you use?
Okay. Well, so I am a Bible believing Christian. So for me, the soul is a spiritual part of the body that is in connection with God, with a creator God. And so for me, the soul is, you can't find it in your body, but you can feel it. And it is the part of you that God knows, but He knows us wholly. Yeah, so I feel like the human soul is the spiritual connection between us as humans and the God of the universe.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your stories here today. Will you share with women where they can find you? And of course, I'll include links below, but
Oh,
anything you
sure. Yeah, great. Well, I mean, probably my most active place that you'll find me, the free things that you can access would be Instagram, so at Melanie the Midwife and at The Great Birth Rebellion. The podcast is obviously completely free and accessible on
incredible
every.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible resource. Yeah. For women.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's the Great Birth Rebellion podcast. And so, yeah, any platform you want. It's on YouTube as well, but it's also on my website, which is melaniethemidwife.com. And there's a few paid offerings. So I have just some little mini courses about how to work through birth without pain relief. And what else for women? Yeah, that's the main thing. I don't sell a lot of stuff to women, but I am writing a book called The Guide to a Great Pregnancy, and that will be a book in a series that probably won't come out until around July 2026. So depending on when you're listening to this, it may or may not be available, but melaniethemidwife.com is where you'll see all the things that I offer. And then in order to sustain the work that I'm doing, obviously it's my life's work too. I run a big conference here in Australia called the Convergence of Rebellious Midwives. That happens once a year around August. Again, the details for that are on the website. And I have an Assembly of Rebellious Midwives, which is an online platform. It's kind of like the online version of the Convergence. And it's where midwives who are kind of challenging the system, who are interested in physiological birth, who are interested in evidence-based birth practices and woman-centered sort of human-type care, we can come together online. So we come together almost weekly through the Assembly of Rebellious Midwives. But yes, all of that is on melaniethemidwife.com would be the place to find and disseminate yourself through all the work there.
Wonderful. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in and choosing to spend time with me today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Heart of the Soul. I would truly appreciate if you might choose to leave a rating, review, or share the show with someone that you know. You can support this podcast by donating to it using the PayPal or Venmo links. If you have stories that you would like to share on The Heart of the Soul, please send me an email through my website. I would love to hear from you. If you would like to work with me, I have both one-on-one and group offerings, online and in person. Find out more on my website, birthingnova.love. If you're listening on Spotify, you can now even send me a voice message. Until next time, remember, be brave, be loved, be wild, be you, because you are the only you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and for the generations to come. Sending each of you so much love. Love, love, love. Mwah.